A Zimbabwean traditional chief has ordered former First Lady Grace Mugabe to exhume the body of late former President Robert Mugabe for reburial at the National Heroes Acre in Harare. On Monday, the traditional court found her guilty of breaking with tradition when she buried him in Kutama, where his late mother is being laid to rest. She's been fined 5 cows and 2 goats for the violation. Now let's discuss this with a social commentator, Alexander Rusero, who's joining me now via Zoom. A very good afternoon to you, Alexander, and thank you so much for your time. So now, in this particular situation, a wife has followed the wishes of her husband, and the husband has specifically said that I do not want to be buried in a particular place because I fear for what it is that will be done to my remains. And therefore, you need to put me in a particular area, especially where it is where my mother is being buried. Why is the local chiefs, and I think there's been a dispute with the government itself, not wanting to adhere to this or follow this and respect it?
Yeah, thank you, and very good afternoon. It would have made sense if the death of Robert Mugabe came at the backdrop of him being at the helm, him maybe being president. Surely he was going to be at the Heroes Acre. Remember, the last time Mugabe appeared in public at a press conference on the eve of the July 30th poll of 2018, he even said he was not going to vote for those who were responsible for tormenting him, meaning there was a contradiction. He was not going to vote for ZANU-PF, he was not going to vote for the current president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, because Mugabe was removed via a military coup. Now, fast forward to the bizarre issue of the attempt to exhume Robert Mugabe's remains and rebury them at the Heroes Acre. There is a silent hand on the government. There is some background, subtle way of the government forcefully trying to salvage the little remains of Robert Mugabe's legacy to their side. Of course, there have been some claims of a certain Bukeri which Mugabe used to have, which is deemed to have some spiritual powers. Remember, Zimbabwe is very, very spiritual. The liberation struggle was also fought hand in glove with the spiritual mediums also giving guidance. It explains why recently we had the unveiling of the statue of the first Chimurenga war in form of Mbuya Nehanda's statue. But the whole idea is that of Mugabe's legacy, where for ZANU-PF, Mugabe's legacy or any remains of it somehow have to be associated with the ZANU-PF, and to them burying him at the Heroes Acre would be fit for them to claim his legacy. But otherwise, it's not necessarily about the wishes of Robert Mugabe, because of course Mugabe also, remember, is not a saint in this. He also forcefully buried certain people at the Heroes Acre, even against their wishes. So the whole adage of what goes around comes around is also at play here, because you look at the founding Secretary General of ZANU-PF in form of Edgar Tekere. He had vehemently said he doesn't want to be buried at the Heroes Acre because some crooks would speechify over his body, would preside over his funeral. But after his death, he was forcefully taken to the Heroes Acre. This is the similar case we are witnessing with Mugabe, where unfortunately the dead cannot control the living. It's the living who will decide at the end of the day. If the government, if ZANU-PF forcefully wants to impose itself, the truth of the matter is that no one can stop it for now, for as long as they decide to do whatever they wish. It's not about the wishes of Mugabe or the so-called respecting Mugabe's wishes. That way, I am against that narrative, because it casts Mugabe as a saint. We have the 20,000 victims of Gukura Hundi who have never been buried peacefully, who 41 years after independence, we are still seeking truth and justice and reconciliation in Zimbabwe. So whatever happens, it's not necessarily much about Mugabe's wish or what, but of course, this is bizarre, this is unfound, this is uncalled for, and the traditional court is ruling actually before the law. He does not have a locus standi to preside over a case to decide where Mugabe should be buried. It could have made sense if they simply said you buried Mugabe in a wrong way against the cultural traditions of the Zimba area where Mugabe is buried. Now to claim and give an order to say now take Mugabe to the Heroes Acre, the chief is doing so as who? He cannot order, he cannot instruct the family when they want to bury their loved one in form of Robert Mugabe.
Alexander, what rituals must now be performed to ensure that the reburial takes place? This is obviously, we're speaking now as though it's going to happen and that Grace Mugabe will have to abide by the rule that has been handed down. Are there any rituals that will then still need to take place? Because I would imagine, yes, he's not a saint, but he is still passed on, and I would imagine there must still be that respect for his body.
Yeah, I am saying that claims of respecting Mugabe would make sense if he himself also had that similar respect to a lot of dearly departed comrades, including the case of unfinished business of Agukura Hundi. Of course, I would not foresee a scenario where the government would want to stretch its directives, its actions guided by a ruling of a traditional court. This is just a chief's court. It's actually more or less a ceremonial court, which does not have a jurisprudence before the law. But all the same, what is happening, as I have alluded to earlier, it's a case of Mugabe's legacy. How best can ZANU-PF salvage Mugabe's legacy, given that it's ZANU-PF which was the chief culprit in removing Mugabe, in ousting him from power in a humiliating way? How then can they claim to say we want to now take charge of Robert Mugabe's remains and bury them at the National Heroes Acre? So the whole wishes of Mugabe in this context, they are neither here nor there, because he himself was also notorious in refusing people what they wished, in refusing even the dead what they would have aspired. The whole idea is whether this is actually proper. Is it appropriate? Why don't they just leave Mugabe to rest? That's where the case is. But I for sure am very certain that one day, one time, one incident in history, one way or the other, Mugabe shall be buried appropriately to the curatorship of the historical value surrounding him, to the way he is actually deserved. Mugabe did not deserve to be buried the way he was buried, because remember, Mugabe is not only an icon for Zimbabwe, but an icon for Africa, irregardless of the shortcomings that he had as a president.